Well, welcome everyone, and thank you for joining. And on behalf of the Children, Youth, and Families at Risk Professional Development and Technical Assistance Center, thank you all for joining our webinar. My name is Philip Ely, and I'm excited to be your host today. But before we begin, there are a few administrative announcements. First off, the recording of today's webinar will be posted on the CYFAR PDTA Center at cyfar.org. And then also, during the presentation, we ask that that you can discuss topics in the chat box and at any point with other participants. However, questions for the presenters should be placed in the Q&A box as depicted on your screen. After the conclusion of this webinar, there will be a pop-up window that will ask you to participate in a short survey. Please click continue and complete a brief online survey to share feedback on today's presentation. Of note, the presenters will also have a short survey that will ask you to participate in. Now it's my pleasure to introduce today's presenters. After the murder of Mr. Floyd and the ensuing protests and riots that occurred, it was identified that there was still a long way to go in having difficult conversations surrounding social justice. We often hear the adage, be the change you want to see, and these women stepped up to do just that. Under the flag of the 4-H Program Leaders Working Group, these women began writing dialogues so young people could discuss, understand, and be engaged in social justice learning. The resource is called Just in Time Equity Dialogues for Youth, and these phenomenal women include Vernell Mitchell Hawkins from the University of Maryland, Michelle Cox from the University of Illinois, Jessica Russo from the University of Minnesota, Nicole Webster from the Pennsylvania State University, and Dorothy Freeman from the National 4-H Council. So now, without further ado, here is today's presentation.
Thank you so very much, Mr. Ely. We appreciate the opportunity to be before this group today. It is indeed our honor to bring this material that we are very excited about. We have been doing this now for about a year. And here we are presenting you these lessons. I think it will be an outstanding opportunity for you to learn and more ways about doing social justice works and ways of engaging young people. Let's move to the next slide, please. What can you expect today? We are doing a two-part series. The first is today, and the second will be on June the 9th. We hope you are able to join us again for the second half. And now I will turn it over to my colleague, Nicole. Next slide, please.
Thank you, Dorothy. So to prepare us for this presentation today and our topic, I'd like for you to look at this quote. Activism is my rent for living on the planet. This was said by Alice Walker. So how do you think this quote relates to 4-H youth development? If you would take a little bit of time to reflect on that and type your answers in the chat box, it would be appreciated. Please type or reflect on this quote and type, excuse me, what you feel this means to you in the chat box. Thank you. Someone wrote action. All right, there we go. Social change. 4-H includes a component of civic engagement and activism. It's the depth to help others in need. It's part of being a human being, mentoring youth. It's a platform to teach and advocate for justice. So we just wanted you to reflect on this because this really does set the tone for the guiding our conversation today and some of the topics that we'll be discussing as we move through the next hour. Thank you. I'd like to move it now to Jess, my colleague Jess.
Hello, everybody. So I just want to give you an overview of the content that is included in the Just-in-Time Equity Dialogue series. So there are about 6 lessons in total designed for ages 12 to 18. And we have included, we have some updates to some of those lessons. And the updated document will include 2 lessons on civil discourse. And we're just in the process of polishing those up, and they'll be available to you probably within the next few weeks or so. And the dialogues are not in any specific order. Each one can be used as a standalone, and they're really designed at different levels of engagement. So some of the dialogues are more exploratory, some are more action oriented. So really you can look through them and choose which one would be most appropriate for the kids that you're working with. Each lesson also includes resources for the facilitators, and an evaluation and reflection is embedded into each one. Next slide, please. So the other direction. There we go. So there's an introduction to the dialogues that I encourage you to read so that you can understand the research base behind the dialogues and how we put them together. And we'll go over that in a little bit. But the framework is built to foster honest and transparent conversation. The materials that are in the dialogues really draw from news headlines and current events, such as recent national conversations about the Aunt Jemima label, George Floyd, of course, and Black Lives Matter movement. And the goal of the content is to challenge youth to think critically about the issues that we're facing as a nation and provide them space for grappling with those issues. In 4-H, we want our youth to be engaged citizens and develop citizenship in a way that gets them to form their own opinions and be open to hearing other people's opinions and asking and deliberating on those harder questions. Next slide, please.
Okay. The dialogue was formatted based on the work of Brian Stanfield, who developed the art of focused conversations in 2000. There are 4 levels of conversations that really guide how the just-in-time equity dialogue was crafted. So we want you to think about the 4 layers and provide you with some tips on how you might think about using this. We want you to acknowledge that focused conversations, especially those on issues of social justice, are definitely not easy. And it's okay to show vulnerability, and even preferable to have a partner as you move into this work, because they can be heavy. Before you dive in, inform yourself. Though don't think that you have to be an expert first. Be brave, again, be vulnerable. We have included some resources for more information and for deeper diving within the context of, the dialogues. It is okay to give your perspective and context. We want you to name it and claim it. This helps to disarm and create a safe space for all who are involved. And then finally, create a safe space by giving the audience, whether that be adults or the youth, the space to feel comfortable to share, because many people will be uncomfortable with some of these topics for various reasons, and providing that open dialogue and conversation and space to be vulnerable is exactly what we would like you to do as you move forward in implementing this in your own counties or youth settings. Next slide.
Good afternoon, everyone. This is really about learn by doing, which is one of the cornerstones of 4-H as an organization. And what we want to do is really spend some time, and which is why we added the 2 civil dialogue lessons, is to really lay the groundwork. And that involves leading with the heart and authenticity. And as Nicole had said earlier, it's okay, you can be vulnerable as the adult facilitator, And that will in turn make the group more comfortable as well. And just know, we're all in this together. No one knows all the answers, but we're out here trying to do the best we can. Everyone has value. Tension is a part of this process, and that's okay. It's okay to be uncomfortable. I know we've said it earlier today that, some of the conversations and some of the things that may be said or heard might be hard to hear, but sometimes that's part of the healing process. And just, being brave, and youth really need a personal voice. Actually, last August, 4-H as an organization did a research project and a survey, and overwhelmingly the majority of the youth who were surveyed said that they want to be able to talk about these things. So if they want to talk about it, who's going to be there to listen? And so we want to be respectful. Just be ready. If something happens that's open or raw, it's okay. As long as we've laid the groundwork and that safe space has been established. Next slide, please. So what we like to do, and we're thinking about this safe environment or brave space, is to create an environment for conversation that's safe, affirming, and fair environment. And this comes from a curriculum called Be Safe Curriculum that was written by Michigan State University. What kind of words in the chat, if you could, and what kind of words come to mind when you think about some of those terms: safe, affirming, fair, environment? And you can feel free to answer in the chat. We like to interact with you. That's how we know you're there. Ooh, inclusive and warming. Oh, I'm sorry, welcoming, not wearing my glasses. Anything else? Belonging, yeah, definitely. Another one of the cornerstones of 4-H. Equity, definitely. How about one more? What's here stays here. Yes. And I would always also add the little caveat that as long as it's not a dangerous, right? A danger. Feeling valued, definitely. Productive. Empathy. Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you for that. Next slide, please. I like that feeling valued came up again. So what we want to do is establish social norms, and we take some time, like I said, especially in the new lessons, to really intentionally have them walk through that process. What do you think should be our guidelines for this kind of discussion? How would you select the guidelines? What would you do to get the group to agree? So we kind of have them go through those things. Can we click again, please? And then here are some of the ones on the right-hand side are some that kind of bubble up when you're having this kind of conversation. So we take them through, like I said, an intensive process to establish these social norms. You kind of want to have like maybe 4 or 5. You don't want 10 rules of engagement. We call them rules of discussion. You don't want that many, but just a couple. So like, be respectful of other feelings. Try not to judge others' beliefs. Don't speak over others. Listen before speaking. Be confidential. Allow everyone time to share. And this last one's important because there might be a person in the room who feels a certain type of way, but they may be shy, or they might be afraid that the group might not accept their feeling or their thought. So really want to make sure the group understands that dynamic could be there and be open and understanding to pull everybody in. Next slide, we'll turn it over to Michelle.
Thank you, Vernell. Now that we've talked a little bit about the intent and the heart and the model on which the just-in-time dialogues were created, we'll go ahead and take a look at what the dialogues look like. So you will, you'll notice that in each dialogue, you'll have the intended audiences, and that's youth and adults. And then you'll also have a time requirement. Just know that time requirement, that's a baseline And you can build that out how you would like to. So that's negotiable. Generally for my sessions, I build in about an hour and a half because I would prefer to have leftover time than not enough time. And you want to give your participants enough time to really engage and really take a deep dive into the dialogue you're facilitating. You will also notice that that there is a dialogue objective in each dialogue, as well as learning objectives. So the dialogue objectives tell the facilitator what the youth will learn from the conversation. So that's kind of the personal growth. And then learning objectives share what the participants will gain in terms of life skills. So the dialogue objectives are consistent throughout the dialogue series. However, the learning objectives differ based upon the desired outcome for the participants in each dialogue facilitation. Slide. Oh, can we back up just really quick because I wanted to add something. I wanted to add that you'll also notice on the first page of your dialogue that there's a small blurb about the background. So it just kind of gives you a brief context of what's going on in the dialogue series. You will also see an engage. So it's kind of a grabber or a hook, and it opens up your conversation. And so right now we're going to talk about our fair and equal, the same thing. Thank you so much for that. Go ahead, slide. So for each dialogue, you will be asked a series of questions based on the ORD model that we talked about early. So those objective, reflective, interpretive, and decisional questions. Also in the dialogue, it will instruct you if you need to pass out something or if you have additional resources. Specifically for this one, our fair and equal, the same thing, you would pass out this comic, the comic that's on the left. You will pass that out and allow your participants to really look at that. And then you will delve into those questions from the ORD model. So the objective questions are always the first set of questions that you will ask in each dialogue. So objective questions are fact-based. So participants can only tell you what they see. So what do you see in this picture? What is different about the youth? And then you will move on to the reflective questions. So reflective questions are meant to help the participants internalize the topic or situation. So you'll engage with questions like, how does this comic make you feel? Slide, Vernell.
I am muted, sorry. So the next set of questions are interpretive questions. And these are really help to help the youth or the participants to connect to the larger picture. So as first is the facts, then what does it mean to you? Now we're gonna go to the greater good. How does this feel? How does this connect to a larger audience, something bigger than you? And then, and you'll see here in this slide, there are 2 questions. Normally there are about 4 to 5 questions in each one. And as a facilitator, you can choose which questions you want to use based on your audience. And then in the decisional questions, those are kind of like a call to action. Okay, we've discussed this, you've gotten some insight, now what? It's those type of questions. As you can see on the screen, is there any other information that you need to know? How can this translate to our club or our community group? Just really want to get them to be able to do something with the information that they've now uncovered. I won't say know or learn, maybe just uncovered. Michelle, next slide, please.
Thank you, Vernell. Also in each dialogue, there is a closing section to formally end the dialogue. The closing session is uniform throughout the dialogue series and is designed to help participants think about how they can put theory into action. So the closing in each dialogue is fill in the blank for me. This has been a blank conversation. Now that we have talked about this topic, it can be a starting point for moving forward. What can I do next to make an impact on my life? And what can I do next to make an impact in my community? And so we always want to make sure that we give the participants an opportunity to really think about what they've learned and how they can apply that in their everyday lives. There's also additional resources. And as stated earlier, these resources are baseline, they're the foundation. Feel free to utilize other resources that you think would be a good fit in your facilitations. You'll also see a space for reflections on the dialogue. So that's a space for a facilitator to reflect on their session. The space is designed to add information, suggestions, and or tips and best practices that will be helpful in future facilitations. So I know that when I facilitate, I always always find something that I can input, like, oh, I think that I'll put that in. I think that that'll help drive the impact on this facilitation, or, oh, maybe I can use a different video. So always make sure that you're reflecting. And I like to do it when it's fresh in my mind, but some people need to process that and then go ahead and jot those notes down, because it'll definitely be beneficial for future facilitations. For me, I've been able to facilitate quite a few, and I just feel like it gets better and better, and it flows better and better every time I do it, because I use that reflection space. Slide. And now let's talk about a couple of points to consider. So point number one, there are no right or wrong answers. So be open to new information and concepts. Two, these are difficult conversations, and that's okay. We've said that quite a few times. They are difficult conversations to have, but it's very important that we have them. So let's respect that everyone can share and receive freely. Point three, we are inviting everyone to become part of the change, to feel safe and free to contribute. So with that said, as participants try their best to properly articulate themselves in these difficult conversations, acknowledge that everyone is speaking from a place of vulnerability. And I believe Nicole said that earlier. Always assume good intentions, and let's all be the change that we desire to see. And lastly, in order to capture the scope of how and where the dialogues are used, we do ask that the evaluation link be shared with colleagues instead of just forwarding your downloaded copy of the tool to them. I know sometimes it's easier to do that, just forward it to them, but we want to make sure that we know where and how the tool is being used, and even how many potential youth or adults that we are causing impact on. So that's good information for us to know. And I'll turn it over to Nicole.
Okay, so following up on what Michelle has talked about, I'm going to speak to the evaluation piece and why this is so important. We know that we are in a data-driven organization, but also a data-driven era. So we know the importance of capturing this type of information. So what you will see, this link, so there's a QSR code, as well as the link. This is the link or the QSR that we would like for you to share with your colleagues so that they can use this. And I'm going to share with you in the next couple of slides some of the information that we've been able to capture. It's a very short survey. I believe there are 8 questions. And it is not meant to track anyone, but definitely is being used as a tool to track how this is being used, in what ways, and what organizations, because we, as you will see in the next slides, that it's not just 4-H that's using this valuable tool. All right. So, oh, next slide, sorry. All right, so this provides you with a picture of the states that have downloaded it. So I'm sure you're going to zero in on your state. I'm in the state of Pennsylvania, and yes, it does say 0%, but that doesn't mean that folks in Pennsylvania are not using it. But what it means is that they're not downloading it from this particular site. So this is why it's extremely important for you to use this Qualtrics link. We want to be able to have all of these populated. The two states that stood out that are most prominent in using this right now, or let me say downloading, I don't want to say using, but downloading, are definitely Illinois and Minnesota. I wonder why. Two people on the call, but part of our developers. But we definitely want to use this as a tool in the future, as to showcase how this is being used, who's using it, and the wonderful work that you all are going to be doing by using this much needed curricula. All right, next slide. All right, so one of the questions, I think it's question 4, ask with which organization or group are you affiliated? So you can see when this was downloaded, this was yesterday, as of yesterday, we had 131 respondents. And so the majority, of course, were from 4-H, but we do have a number of other folks who are from other youth serving organizations, such as the Girl Scouts, YMCA, and then that other were folks who just did not report what organization they were with. But again, you can see that folks value this type of information, the dialogues. And so we definitely want to be able to show that the content of this is extremely important, it's timely, and it's not just useful within the 4-H context. Next slide. Okay, this word cloud captures the question about where and with whom are you using this content. So I just felt it would be more useful to create this word cloud so you can see how people are using it and with what groups. Of course, the most prominent word in the middle is 4-H, but we also see that program, dialogue, leadership, community, discussion, conversation, ambassador. So these are the words that stand out the most, or that are most prominent, are the ones that had repeated, that were repeated within the data. So you can see here that people are using this in various ways. What I found to be quite interesting is the virtual and talking about equity. There was a comment in there about review, like people are reviewing their own content in a way in which they want to bring these conversations to the forefront, having a new spin on how diversity and inclusion is discussed in these contexts. So again, you can see that people are using this, educators are using this in a number of different ways. And again, we want to encourage you to go into this space. Even if you already have the dialogue, please go back and make sure that you are putting into this space how you are using it, what state you're from, and so forth. These are just the few slides that I wanted to share with you today, just so that you can see how this work is being used and shared with others. And we hope that you will find it useful, even if you want these reports as you begin to build out your own reporting for your states. We can provide you with some of this context so you have a greater picture in which to share with others, stakeholders, specifically about how this is being used. Next slide. So now that we've shared this with you, I'd like to read this quote by Cornel West. "None of us alone can save the nation or the world, but each of us can make a positive difference if we commit ourselves to do so." So given the information that we've shared, the format, the intent, the purpose of these particular dialogues, how do you see yourself using this resource, or how have you been using this resource? If you can please take a few minutes to type in the chat, that would be appreciated. And I know some of you have said that you're already using it. So it could be, if you could let us know with what groups or organizations, are you partnering with others? Are you using it in schools? Okay, I'm hoping to start 4-H teen clubs focused on DEI. Thank you, Sarah. A workforce development 4-H club with a community and civic engagement spin club to facilitate a discussion with youth that I work with to promote civic engagement. Okay. County and state with youth and educators, social justice. So there seems to be a lot of social justice focus. And I know we didn't really talk about that, but those are the newer, or the two new pieces that we've added. And so perhaps at the close of this, we can talk a little bit about that, Vernell. Would that be okay? Okay. So it seems as though, oh, okay. Train volunteers to be more ready. We used it with IDI, with our state 4-H council. So there seems to be some breadth and also depth. Some in PA are using with their PDC, okay. All right, thank you for sharing. If you have any more that you'd like to share in the chat, please feel free to do so. But we really want you to think more holistically about how are you using this and how it can benefit stakeholders across the board. So thank you. Next slide.
We thank you for the opportunity to have brought our presentation to you today. As you can see, these 4 professional women are very excited about this topic, and we really do look forward to your critical analysis and the questions that you have before us. The ORIC process that we just reviewed, the objective, the reflective, the interpretive, the decisional way of questioning brings us to clear decisions about what we wish to implement together. It's a process that is used across the nation with facilitators, and these ladies, these women worked hard to adjust these dialogues to be more DEI and youth and 4-H friendly. And I thank them for what they have done today. And so we're going to turn it over to Philip now to facilitate the question and answer session.
Thank you, Dorothy. So as a reminder, if you have any questions for the team, please just put it in the Q&A box. Our first question comes from Kareem, and it's, is this program connected in any way to extensions coming together for racial understanding dialogue work?
And I will answer that one. At this point, it has not been connected. We are beginning to build a True Leaders in Equity agenda, and the just-in-time curriculum will be anchored in under the True Leaders in Equity agenda. And as part of building that larger True Leaders in Equity program, I can see that it will be anchored again with the Coming Together for Culture Understanding curriculum, which is basically designed for adults. And we now know that in some states, I think Minnesota is one of those states, that young people are leading some of those dialogues in communities. So now I believe that there is a natural opportunity to bridge them together.
And before we go to our next question, I just had a question based on what you just said. Are you seeing that this helps youth to create dialogues with others in the community, so like other adults, and to really change the conversation and the tone of the conversation?
I would say absolutely. I think that it gives them the tools and the resources that they need to successfully and gently pose those questions to start those conversations. I know that I have a social justice fan club in Illinois, and a lot of the participants feel comfortable, more comfortable than they did in these conversations with family, with friends, and with classmates. So I do think it makes a difference, because the way that it's facilitated, it just gives them tools and it gives them different perspectives. And so I believe that it arms them with the proper information that they need and the technique to have those conversations, and have them create a safe space to have those conversations.
Michelle, if I may add, I think going through the ORID method gives them, as Michelle said, the tools. And I think that it's going to help them become a leader, in that they can have a difficult conversation without blowing up or blowing their top, and that it's going to be infectious, and that other people are going to say, well, how can you talk about that without getting all upset? So I think it'll be another way for our youth to become leaders in a community.
And I would like to add as well, what I really like about this process, that there's no right or wrong answers. And it's not about fixing anyone. It's about truly having a dialogue to allow individually for people to come to their own conclusions about what they themselves may wish to change and to learn more about.
So Matthew asked, have you started to create future lessons?
Matthew, not yet. We did, Michelle, we mentioned that we added 2 more lessons in for the social justice curriculum. So we have added 2 more lessons in, and we have not gone forward yet to create future lessons, because we really want to make sure that it's being used. And that's why it's so important for our evaluations to come in, so that we know that if it's a need. We felt it was a need, and we took a risk to develop these, but we weren't so sure that our system would use them. And so we're beginning to see evidence that it is being used within the system. And the more and more that happens, the more and more we can bring more people in to do some of the writing and the development as well.
Yeah, I was just going to share that the civil dialogue are probably the most recent updates to it, to kind of serve as a precursor, I think, to kind of get you ready and introduce them to setting the groundwork and how to have a successful dialogue. And then the first, the original 6 are the actual timely and relevant conversations.
And if I may add, Renelle, one of the earlier points that was made during our initial conversations was about turning this into action. So it's great to have these conversations, but how do you turn the conversation into action? And so I'm sure at some point we'll begin to think about expanding that point out and bringing that into the context of the dialogues.
But I'm going to add to you, Nicole, but all of that will be predicated upon the data, our folks using it and how are they using it. Yeah, absolutely.
That goes without saying. That goes without saying.
It's another reason why we need the data.
That's why we need the data, yeah.
So another question from Jamie is, when using this tool for adults, can you talk about some of the challenges?
I am using this tool internally at National 4-H Council on sessions that's called Let's Talk. So they're all adults. And some of the challenges is that people feel very, very uncomfortable initially. And you have to allow quiet space for people to talk through some of the efforts, as well as you need to make sure that it feels safe to them. I think safety with adults is even greater than it is with young people, because they don't want to be judged. And so you have to make sure that you're not in a place of judgment, and that you hold everybody true to the ground rules that are set up front.
I'm going to agree with you, Dorothy. I think when dealing with adults, that safe space is even more important, and just really making sure. I find I have to like remind them, we're in this step. You can't go back and say, to make sure that we follow the process. I think, but I think definitely that safe space is going to be more important, especially when you're dealing with your colleagues. Sometimes they feel like they're afraid to say the wrong thing, or afraid to say something that might be offensive, or somebody might feel a certain type of way. So really spending that time to lay the groundwork is going to be important.
Mm-hmm. And something that I've experienced is not really that heavy as a safe space creating, but adults jump ahead because they want to get the answer right. So I know I facilitated one with the Aunt Jemima syrup, and it asked questions like objective questions. What do you know about Aunt Jemima? And so they Googled it because they wanted to get the right answer, which what I wanted them to do. So sometimes adults want to get the answer and not learn. Well, I think they want to learn, but they also want to get the answer right. So that's something that I've experienced. And then also with definitely creating that safe space, especially in my experience with colleagues, because we are all on a different space in the spectrum, right? And so some people don't feel comfortable, or may not feel comfortable with their views, or they may think that they might be judged by what they say. And I just encourage everyone, it's non-judgmental. We're here to learn together, and we're all on a different space in the continuum of diversity, equity, and inclusion. So it's okay, because we're here to learn, and we're here to, what do they say? Go and grow. We're here to grow together, and we're not here to point fingers or blame, point the finger of blame, but we're here to start these conversations so that as a group, we can begin the healing process, and we can begin to go out and then have these conversations with other people that I may not have influence over, or that I may not have contact with, because we all have our scope of influence. And so where I can't reach people, you can. And so just really allowing them to feel, not understand, but to feel, like Vernell and Dorothy said, that this is a non-judgmental zone. We're here to talk about it from everybody's perspective. Everybody has a different worldview.
And I'll just say, one of the things that I love is that exactly right there. Sorry about that. That it's non-judgmental, that it is a conversation that is started, with facts. Hey, what do you see here? And then it's, having that conversation without pointing the finger, so that everyone can really speak their mind in a safe space. I love that about it. Just wanted to circle back to June's question that she put in the chat earlier about examples. And I know we've already mentioned a few, with Dorothy talking about using it at 4-H and with 4-H Council. We've also, saw in the chat that some people used it in different venues. But can you just circling back, can you just talk about some other examples of where we've used this, or where you've all have used this?
That question. Oh, sorry, Renee.
No, go ahead. I was just unmuted. That's all. I was going to say, I did a training for our Maryland State Volunteers Association, 4-H Volunteer Association. And one more thing I want to add, I'm sorry, is that we were very intentional about which comic we put in, which topic we chose. One of them I put in and I tested it, and it like blew up in my face. So like, no. So, we were very intentional in choosing topics for the dialogues, that would encourage conversation. So it's, it's not just something we just pulled out the newspaper. So just know that, there are very intentional topics and reasonings for what's included. Nicole, I'm sorry.
So I'll talk about my experience, which has been a little bit different because it was with colleagues who are not within 4-H. And what it allowed was another lens in which for people to unpack some of these stereotypes that they held about different topics, different sets of people. And so what it did in that context, and I will say this, and for those of you who might be thinking about using this with adults, it then requires you as the facilitator to give a lot more time to debrief. So for example, one of the activities that was brought in was about redlining. When we were talking about Aunt Jemima and what was going on during that time period, it kind of morphed into this other conversation about systemic racial barriers and policies that have been part of the US system for, decades. And so people then, decades. So people then began to ask these questions. Well, what does this mean? What does that mean? So I found that it requires a lot more, I don't want to use the word hand-holding, but the ability to bring in deeper conversations about context and history and traumas and legacies that have existed within communities, so that you can then begin to talk about how do those impact how young people move, see, and feel within the communities in which you're working. When you're able to do that from an adult level, I think it then allows you as the facilitator, and perhaps those people will go on to be facilitators, to engage in this context a little bit differently. So I will say that. I hope that's helpful.
And I can share another example of using it. I've used it a couple times with colleagues, with my own extension colleagues. So it's another adult example. And just to add on to what Vernell said about being intentional about which picture you're going to show or which video, or it was interesting with a couple of times I did it. I happened, because they were colleagues, I happened to know a lot of them fairly well enough to be able to make some good judgments about, say, which video I used on. And I very intentionally used with one group a video that included a little clip of the George Floyd murder. And I did that very intentionally because this group, I felt like I could push them a little bit, a little bit more strongly. But with another group, I knew that at least with a couple people that would have been, would push them over an emotional edge that I know that they were already on, and wouldn't have been helpful in that context. And so that was a case where I knew my participants fairly well and could kind of choose. And both of those dialogues were successful because of that, partially because of that intention and picking out the right resources to share with them.
I want to agree with Jess. One way that I've used it is I've trained the youth leadership team in Illinois. So they are now ambassadors for the Just-in-Time Equity Dialogues. So they do train young people in our counties. But I just wanted to touch on the intentionality that pretty much everybody has shared. They're designed to get your attention. I did one with the Aunt Jemima, and those objective and reflective questions were just questions. And then there's a clip that was played. And honestly, after I played that clip, so while I was playing the clip, I was also watching the screens of the young people, some of them that I could see. But when I got done playing the clip, and just a short video, and went back to, because I do ask that they all turn on their cameras because we want to have a face-to-face engagement, right? And I knew that I needed to give them a couple of moments to digest what they just saw. They didn't know. They honestly, they didn't know. And so that conversation turned from, it wasn't superficial, but after the video, the environment changed. That conversation became an in-depth conversation. They, the young people needed to do something. They wanted to act on that, and they wanted to voice their opinions. And at the beginning, there was some communication, but after the video, there was a lot of communication. And so that's when I knew that we would start needing, depending on what you're doing and who you're doing it with, you may need to build in more time. So the intentionality of it gets the results because it is an attention grabber, because there is a problem that we need to discuss. And so this is a way, the best way to start a discussion, I believe, is to educate. These are not educate, but these are the facts. So let me give you the facts. This is what you thought it was, the objective questions. Now let me give you the facts. Now let's talk about it.
Absolutely, fact-based. And again, that just makes everything different. And a lot of times we can't be better if we don't know better. And so being able to have these conversations just to learn and to grow can just change the world. Just as a reminder, if you have any questions, put it in the Q&A box. We probably have time for maybe one, maybe two more questions. And not seeing any questions, I'll turn it back over to the panel for any final thoughts or any final discussion points.
We would like for you to take the evaluation as we've stressed. There we go. The workshop evaluation. So this evaluation, if you could please take a few moments to fill out this quick online survey that will help us as we move forward in conducting these workshops, refining the dialogues, or even developing new ones. We just want to hear back from you. So thank you very much. Oh, someone put it in the link. Okay. And I just wanted to stress that the QSR, so we talked about the evaluation or the QSR, the Qualtrics for the actual dialogues. When you move through those 8 questions, you will then see at the end the supplement and the dialogue. So that's how you will access the dialogue. So when you're explaining to folks to please go to the site to download, that's what's going to happen. So they'll answer a few questions and then they'll move right to the location of both the supplement and the dialogues. So I just wanted to make sure that was very clear.
And we do have another question that popped up from Kareem. It says, have all these sessions been delivered virtually?
Yes.
Yes.
In Maryland, we're not doing face-to-face in-person programming just yet. We're just now starting to roll it out as of this month. So all of it has been virtual for our state.
Same with ours, same with Illinois.
And with the ones I'm doing at council, they're all virtual, yes.
Yeah, and I believe, well, I can't say for sure, I suppose, but I believe that probably most of the ones that have been done in Minnesota have been virtual. We do have some things that are allowed in person, so.
Which might be another reason why when Michelle said that she encourages camera use, that way you can see and still be able to connect. with the participants.
But yet some people still may be uncomfortable. I'm finding that in the adult groups that some people still may be uncomfortable. And so I'm doing another one on next Monday internally. And we are now trying to figure out how we do smaller groups so that we can have facilitators in the smaller groups that give people a sense of connection in smaller group and hopefully more comfort, being willing to share more in those smaller groups. And so, but they're all virtual.
So like maybe breakout rooms with facilitators in each, you're suggesting?
Yes.
Or even taking advantage of some of the apps that allow for that more intimate setting. So I know yesterday, Vernell, Michelle, and I talked about this Discord. And so there are, perhaps what might be useful for us is to even think about some of these resources, social media apps that could be used in this space to create a more intimate environment, and then perhaps sending that out. If people are, amenable to that, we can definitely think about putting together some sort of a list like that. A resource guide.
Yeah, and as soon as we can get permission, we're going to add another resource that has additional questions in case when you get in the midst of a discussion and you run out of questions to ask, you can have additional questions to kind of follow up with what's happening in the room. So we're adding those kinds of tools to the material as well. Philip, may I say something before we conclude?
Absolutely.
And I made a call to each of these highly professional women who were committed to this work. And they basically volunteered their time to step forward to do this work. But I want those of you who are on the line to know that we're working on behalf of our system. Our Extension Committee on Organization and Policy, known as ECOP, has named 4-H diversity, equity, and inclusion as a high priority in our system. And so as part of my work at National 4-H Council, we have built a 4-H Equity Strategic Plan. So we don't see this work going away. We see this work increasing. And so I just want to thank you for joining us today to begin your journey. And hopefully we'll use this work in your communities with the places where you have influence to continue the dialogue, to continue discussion, and to continue the learning as well as the healing of our country. And so I want to personally thank you for being with us today and coming to hear what this team has to say. And hopefully you will join us again on June the 9th. Thank you, Philip.
No problem. And you just took the words right out of my mouth. As you can see, there's the contact information. And we just had someone just say, thank you for all your work on such an important topic. And I echo that. So you see all our contact information on. Also, on behalf of the CYFAR PDTA Center, again, just thank you all for participating. And especially thank you, ladies. This is wonderful work and we really, really appreciate it. Again, don't forget, for those who are current CYFAR grantees, during the PDE, sign up for the session and we'll go more in depth into the conversations and what the materials look like. So don't forget to sign up and participate in that as well. Again, a copy of this will be on the CYFAR website later on. So thank you all for joining today, and we will see you next time.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.